Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here with Philippe J. Fournier for this new episode of The Numbers. And Philippe, we are fast approaching our first anniversary as a podcast. Our first ever episode was back on September 8th, 2023. So we've almost gotten through an entire year of this. How do you feel after 12 months of The Numbers podcast?
I feel really good. We have a good crew of members. We have a good Discord thing going. And I think you and I, not only have we talked about the subjects, the topics that we are passionate about, but I think we also had fun along the way. So, that makes all the difference. And if you hear noise in the background, my cat is there. Of course, she had to make an appearance. I forgot to close the door. Anyway, one full year of The Numbers. So long live The Numbers. And I think the next calendar year, it's going to be very busy and lots to talk about, let's say.
We would have thought that maybe in a year we'd only be starting a campaign, but maybe a year from now we'll be starting leadership campaigns months after the election's over and everything has kind of fallen apart. We'll see what happens. So that brings us to our first topic today, which is the New Democrats. Jagmeet Singh putting a video out yesterday on Wednesday saying that he has ripped up the deal. He really needed to have a piece of paper that he was ripping up on the camera. That would have been better. But he's ripped up the deal, the Supply and Confidence Agreement, or the Confidence and Supply Agreement. I've been calling it the CASA, but everybody I saw yesterday was calling it the SACA. Anyway, they have decided to pull out of it, saying that they can't support the government anymore. This brings up lots of questions about what the next few months is going to bring. We're back to a brinksmanship style of minority parliament.
Yeah.
I guess the first question, and maybe we can start here, is how much of a surprise was this? Because it seemed like it surprised everybody.
In a grand scheme of things, it's not a surprise. I think it's the timing that was a surprise. 2 weeks ago, was it 2 weeks ago with the railway, not strike, but it was a lockout? That was probably the time to do it. Perhaps they had to get ready and get a statement and get those videos. Maybe that was the last straw. But I think we mentioned this on the podcast in June. I thought the Liberals losing St. Paul's was the right time for the NDP to do this, just before summer, so you get geared up. I'm not going to really criticize because I do not know if it's better or not. But was I surprised? Not really. But we're not getting an election on October 20th, 2025 now. I mean, how do the Liberals pass the next budget with the current situation? The Bloc, they're ready for an election. They don't care. The Conservatives, of course, are just salivating at the idea of an election. And now the NDP, I mean, if they support the next budget, it means these were only empty threats. And, I know in politics, empty threats are part of the game. But what about you? I mean, were you caught by surprise yesterday?
Yeah, I think so. I thought that the NDP would keep up with the deal and then maybe pull out at the budget next year and then send the country to the polls at that point. I wasn't really expecting it right away, especially when you hear some of the signaling that was coming from the Liberals. They seemed very confident that it was going to keep forward. And apparently the Liberals were only informed a few minutes or within an hour of the video of Jagmeet Singh making the announcement going up. So they seem to have literally and very truthfully been caught by surprise, which I think tells you a lot about how things are going over there. You mentioned the Bloc, and I think that's an interesting thing here because a lot of people are now talking about what this means for when the next election will be. But you hear some signaling from the Bloc that maybe they might want to use this to their advantage for a little bit, see if they can get a couple things for Quebec before the next election. So there might be some multiple dancing partners if things, push comes to shove. I don't think the Bloc is afraid of an election or anything like that, but they do seem to be a little bit more willing to do something than I might have thought maybe a month ago. So maybe this isn't going to mean an election in the fall. But if you had to put the three scenarios now, fall 2025, spring 2025, and fall 2024, in terms of the likelihood of them happening, I think it's now spring 25, fall 24, and fall 25. It feels very hard to imagine that after pulling out of the deal, the NDP would end up supporting a final budget for what? To survive, have the government survive for a few more months? It feels like right now there's, 10-15% chance this lasts until October 25?
But hang on, but you would rank this fall ahead of next fall in your odds, right?
Yeah.
Wow, okay, I'm not sure about that.
Well, the Conservatives will be able to put forward a non-confidence motion at the first chance they have. I don't know when that'll be. But at that point, the NDP will have to swallow itself whole if they end up voting for the government again after coming out and saying that they're weak and they don't deserve another chance. And
that would be a first.
Well, it wouldn't really be, but
I know I understand what you mean. It's just that I do not see an election in the cards this fall. Even though I think the NDP wanted to do this ahead of an election, not just before, just to give them some leeway, to give some landing gear. What do we call it? I'm sorry.
Runway.
Runway. Thank you. Some runway before the next election. I mean, if an election is scheduled, but not scheduled, but déclenché next month, then we see that the NDP's sole motivation was to go into an election right away. I don't see numbers that indicate the NDP should go into an election, even though if they want to stand by their principles, they could be wiped out. I mean, I published on Sunday my regular updated projection. I had the NDP at the lowest point since at least the 2019 election. 16 seats on average. Now, of course, fluctuations. It may go back up. I think the Nanos poll had the NDP a bit higher this week. But on average, they're not making any gains and they're getting beaten by the Conservatives out west. So it would make no sense for the NDP to schedule an election really soon like this fall. So that's why, I think falls are less likely than the spring. But if I had to say between this fall and next fall, I'd say next fall is more likely. But anyway,
But I guess my reasoning for that is that there will be a point when the NDP will have to either defeat the government, go through with its threats, or really, in my view, humiliate themselves to then just end up supporting the government anyway after making a big show of this. So I agree it would be a bad idea. They have elections happening in British Columbia and Saskatchewan where the NDP, in one case, fighting to survive as a government, in another case, poised to make some big gains, probably not form a government, but make some inroads. Yep. And the NDP probably can't afford to have a federal campaign happen at the same time as those two provincial campaigns in provinces where the party is strong, has resources, and where if you're a New Democrat, you're a staffer, that kind of thing, probably much more interested in making sure things go well in BC and Saskatchewan than helping Jagmeet Singh get to 20 or 25 seats, right? But again, just because it's a bad idea doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And so it just feels that it's possible now in a way that it didn't feel like it was possible 2 days ago. But I agree with you that it's still not likely, because I think that the NDP will have a lot of incentives not to go to the polls. But what if we're talking about an election call at the end of October, early November, when those provincial campaigns are behind them? I don't know. Maybe at that point the NDP says, look, we're going to make fools of ourselves if we end up voting for the government. I just think that there's a possibility that it could be this fall that I wouldn't have thought of before the news this week.
Yeah, I hear you. You make a fair point. But all right, let me ask you this, Eric. Do you think there's any relationship between the announcement from Jagmeet Singh, the end of CASA, the CASA was Saka, there you go, that's that one, and the by-elections that are coming up? Because the federal by-elections on September 16th, it's coming soon, right? It's in, 12 days from now? It's possible that the NDP wins both. Mm-hmm. And that they feel empowered after that. Even though winning both has no direct correlation with what's going on nationally. But so, do you think there's a link, or am I reaching here?
I think there probably is one. In Elmo-Transcona, they're going up against the Conservatives. And if you're a voter who is just angry at the Trudeau government and the New Democrats are in an agreement with the Liberals, it must be pretty hard to say, no, vote for us. We are against the Liberals too, just not entirely. And, we're keeping their feet to the fire. I think that it does make that message a lot easier. And then in La Salle-Mont-Verdun, your main opponent is a Liberal. Yeah. And if you're in agreement with them, it's hard to, again, make the case that you should switch over to the NDP. So I do think it does have a role there, and it will probably make things easier for them between here and September 16th than it would have before. At least that seems to be true enough. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's probably the case. It's just it turns out that I was there for an interview. I was in La Salle-Mont-Verdun. I was on Wellington Street yesterday. The campaign office of the NDP candidate Craig Sauvé is just like 1 block away from the Liberals' office, right? And I think the block is just around the corner. They're all around Wellington, at least the 3 competitive parties in this election. And I know signage is a very poor indicator, so I'm not gonna go crazy on signage. I saw maybe 2 tiny Liberal signs, and it's covered in orange. Like, it looks like the NDP is really putting everything it has. And I would not be surprised if Craig Sauvé, the NDP candidate, brought along some foot soldiers from Projet Montréal and maybe even Québec Solidaire. I'm speculating here. I do not know this, but it would not be surprising because that area of Montreal, it's center-left, progressive, a little gentrified. It felt really like the Liberals are losing this, and we haven't seen writing polls, which I'm surprised. Maybe it's going to come next week. I mean, usually Main Street Research like to go into these things, especially for big writings. But man, the Liberals could lose La Salle, and then they lost St. Paul's. They could lose La Salle. They lost this agreement. And to circle back to what you said about the bloc, what I've been hearing from the bloc people is that an election can go anytime. They're not going to support this government on anything because that line from Pierre Poilievre, le bloc libéral, right? He's been attacking the bloc incessantly in Quebec, saying that the bloc supported the Liberals how many times on how many bills. It's hanging by a thread. So anyway, I can see. I will circle back to this after the by-elections, but this could be a game changer. It's also possible that the NDP loses both, and then suddenly the narrative change. But we'll get back to that, I'm sure.
That's what I think is interesting here, is that if the NDP wins both of these by-elections, then this looks like a genius move from Jagmeet Singh, that he propelled the party to victory in these 2 by-elections. They're now prepared to go to the polls. He's finally cut himself loose from the Liberals, and now it's the sky's the limit for the NDP. If they lose both of them, though, then this does not look like the best decision. He's put himself in a position where he is no longer assured of being able to keep the Liberal government afloat without, kind of, as I said, swallowing himself whole. And whether or not it would have been related to it, it would seem like, well, there was this that happened, that he pulled out of the deal, and then they end up losing both of these seats or not winning in La Salle-Mont-Verdun. So it is pretty high risk. You have to give them some credit for taking a chance here that it is going to either look like, as I said, a genius move or a boneheaded move. There could be some other outcomes, like we got some questions. We're going to get to the questions later on, but because they were related to this, I thought we could deal with some of them now. We got a question from NK, and he says, if they win both of them, there'll be a lot of buzz. That's what I said. But what happens if there's something confusing, like the NDP wins in Elmo-Transcona, and the Bloc ends up winning in La Salle-Mont-Verdun? Yeah. What are we going to conclude out of a result that isn't so conclusive and decisive as that? A mixed result, a split ticket kind of thing.
That is a good question. I will preface my answer with the outcomes of the by-elections will be overblown, whatever they are. Like, come on. I mean,
not by us. Not by us. Come on. We're only going to do a 9-hour live stream.
Yeah, but at least. But if the NDP wins both, the narrative, as you said, could be like, oh, the NDP, they made such a good decision, they're on their way. And we know that's not the case. Those are two local events that have nothing to do with the national numbers. And again, half the NDP right now, the federal NDP, they're from BC. As long as we don't see clear BC numbers. I mean, winning La Salle et Mar Verdun for the NDP is not a sign that they're surging in Quebec or in Montreal. Like, come on, let's be real. It would be a good outcome for the NDP. It will not be a sign of anything. And Elmwood-Transcona, they're supposed to win Elmwood-Transcona. It's a bigger story if they don't. So that's what bugs me about this. As you said, the narrative will be, but it's a dumb narrative. These are local events. I know I will probably dabble in them as well, because the media will ask us questions like, what does this mean? And answering, well, it doesn't mean much of anything outside of two local events. That's a bad answer to a question, but I think it's the smarter one. But okay, so to go back to NK's question, because what if the Bloc wins Transcona? I think the
Bloc won't win Transcona.
No, Transcona. Sorry,
it's probably going to finish pretty dead last in that.
Yeah,
one.
Dead last, behind all the independents. Okay, so the Bloc wins La Salle et Mar, and the NDP wins Transcona. Then it's a non-story in Manitoba because it's a whole. And then it's a strange story in Montreal because even though the numbers show the Bloc is not up in Montreal, even though it's doing well in Quebec, especially Francophone Quebec, I think we'll just throw our hands in the air and says, okay, that was weird. Let's see what happens next year. Because that MP will be there for 6 months or 8 months. Mm-hmm. I mean, didn't we say the maximum chaos was Conservative in Transcona and the Bloc in Montreal?
Yeah, because it would depress both the Liberals and the NDP, though that might ensure a longer parliament. If that happens.
But what do you think? What's your answer to NK's question here? Like, what do you think would happen with the split ticket or something?
I think you and I will look at the actual swing in great detail. And I think that will tell us a lot, right? Like, let's say the NDP wins Elmwood-Transcona, but they go down 15 points. We're going to say, well, at least they didn't lose, but we're going to say this is a bad sign for them. Yeah. If in La Salle et Mar Verdun, the NDP goes up 10, 15, but just comes up short, and the Bloc ends up winning with 31%, they haven't been a huge gain. It'll mix the signals a little bit. But if you're the Liberals and you lose the seat to the Bloc, I think that's actually a much worse outcome.
You think so?
Because if they lose it to the NDP, they can say, well, they had a good candidate. This isn't an NDP riding. We'll get it back next time. It's not a big sign of anything. I think that would be also a wrong kind of, a loss is a loss. But if they lose it to the Bloc, they're at risk of losing lots of seats to the Bloc. And so there would be a lot of MPs outside of Montreal, and not too far outside of Montreal, like South Shore, Laval, but also in the eastern townships and places like that, who might be thinking, ooh, maybe we really do actually have to be worried for the Bloc. And then the Bloc's bargaining power gets even bigger. Yeah. And they can try to make more demands from the Liberal government. And if, for the Bloc, it could work out pretty well if they're saying, well, we're willing to support the government if they give us X, Y, and Z. And then the Liberals say, well, that's way too much. We can't give you X, Y, and Z. Then the Bloc can be like, well, guess we got to go to the polls. It gives them an issue. There's not really nice outcomes for the Liberals in any of these. No. Unless they win La Salle et Mar Verdun. But even if they win it, they're probably going to lose a lot of support.
That's the thing. If they go from 40, what they had, 43%, 42%, and they win with 31%, okay, that you lost 10 points in the bedrock of Liberal support in the country. If you're losing Toronto, losing Montreal, there's no good outcome for the Liberals. I think we've said that many times over the course of the last months, but that's what the numbers
things are not going well for them. No. We got one question also from Logan Stitt, and he was asking about what impact it would have on the by-elections. But he also thinks this. He also was wondering if we think we'll see any impact in the polls from this. Do you think the NDP gets a bump out of this? Or a month from now, are we still looking at 15, 17, 16, sometimes 20. Do you think it'll have any impact?
Sometimes I think we have to be careful, remind ourselves that the general population, the voting population, does not follow politics like you and I and our members. So I'll give you a little example. I was playing hockey last night. My hockey season restarted. It was the first night.
Did you win?
Well, we play a friendly, so there's no ref. But I did okay. Just a little rusty and tough this morning, but 1 year older. And there were less than a handful of the guys I played with even knew that that happened. That the NDP scrapped the deal. They are educated and they follow the news and stuff, but perhaps we overstate the effect of this. People will hear, okay, the deal with the NDP Liberal is over, but is there an election? No, then who cares?
Yeah, see, that's exactly it. I got questions as myself, like, oh, does this mean there's an election? And be like, well, maybe not. They could still support them. And then they'll be like, oh, well, that sounds worse. Like, I feel like it's possible that the outcome of this is, the rhetoric is from the NDP is not going to really match what the outcome is going to become, right? Like people hear this and they're like, oh, I guess it means we're going to the polls. But then every time that we're not, I think it will just reinforce this perception the NDP might be trying to get away from, that they're tied to the hip to the Liberals.
Before we step away from this subject, I want to ask you a question. Again, you're the historian among us here. Let's say something strange happens, and when the House resumes, the government falls. Or there's a confidence vote and some weird stuff happens and the government falls. A federal election, a federal campaign, while there's also 3 provincial elections going on. I think the writ in BC will drop on September 21st, I think it is, like days after for Saskatchewan and New Brunswick. Is this possible, first? And second, has it happened before? I know in the 40s there were overlapping elections, but I'm trying to think of recent examples of overlapping campaigns. We don't
have it happen very much anymore. I think I did a quiz a few episodes ago on overlapping elections or something like that.
With me?
Yeah, but I think it was, we did one, actually. And there weren't very many.
No.
You had to go back pretty far to find multiple campaigns that are overlapping. As to whether it would be possible, so the campaigns are all on the fixed election dates, laws, and most of them have an out for if there's a federal campaign happening. But my question would be, if the government fell and an election was called after the writ had dropped in those 3 campaigns, I don't think you could put that genie back in the bottle. So the writs are going to drop in, I think, New Brunswick and BC somewhere around the 19th to 20th and 21st. So that doesn't really give it a lot of time. So it seems unlikely that the government could fall before the provincial one. So if, let's say, there is a vote of non-confidence at the end of September, then you could have overlapping campaigns. Wow. And that just sounds like a nightmare for everybody involved, especially us. But it's a nightmare for, think of just election laws.
Yeah.
How you're only allowed to spend a certain amount of money. How complicated would that be if you're the New Democrats wanting to advertise in BC while there's a BC election campaign? I don't know how that works. And it just seems very fraught. All the volunteers would be exhausted and double booked. I think that's one of the reasons why you don't think this would happen. And this would impact the Conservatives as well, right? Because their people will be working in BC, in Saskatchewan, New Brunswick. Will they want to risk, things happening? And I don't know. It's going to be. That might be one of the main reasons why there won't be an election, is that the federal parties might not want to get in the way of their provincial cousins.
I'm trying to think what happened. I mean, if the writ is dropped and you have an election date fixed, but something happens, like force majeure or something, can't you go to the lieutenant government and says, well, we need to push the election a few weeks? I mean, I'm sure it can be. I mean, didn't Newfoundland do that in 21 because of COVID?
But I think it has to be the head of the elections authority who makes that decision.
Oh, okay. That's
because
different.
Imagine a scenario where, you're the prime minister or the premier, and you go to the governor, the GG or the LG, asking for a prolongation of the election campaign because things aren't going very well. But you say it's also because of that hurricane. I don't know. That could get complicated. That does sound like that could be problematic. So yeah, I think that once the writs drop, they're probably going to be locked in unless the electoral authority feels there's a real reason to postpone it. But even then, as we saw when they had wildfires in
Alberta,
they only postponed the voting in some of the some of the ridings. I think they wouldn't do the whole province. So I don't know.
With good reason.
High bar.
Exactly, and it has to be a high bar. Again, otherwise you can imagine somebody taking advantage of that. But wow, so the stakes this fall suddenly are much higher than we thought, huh? Wow.
Yeah. We did get a couple polls out over the last week. I wonder if they're even... Well, I mean, they give some context, but we will go through them quickly because we didn't get too many. There was the Angus Reid Institute poll, 43 for the Conservatives, 21 for the Liberals, which is quite low, but not that low for Angus Reid.
Yeah.
And 19 for the NDP. There were some big Quebec numbers for the Bloc. So if the Bloc was wondering about an election campaign, they're at 42, which is really high. That's about 10, 12 points higher than most other polls. The Liberals are only at 21. And then we had the Nanos one, not so bad, I guess, for the Liberals. It had 26 for the Liberals, 39 for the Conservatives, 20 for the NDP. Any takeaways from these polls?
I don't want to sound mean or anything.
That's a good way to start a sentence.
But it's just that Quebec sample, it's that Quebec sample from the Angus Reid Institute. Like if I do something in life, in my work, I screw up, or it's a bit weird, and I try to correct myself. I try to improve all the time. When you realize that you have a skewed Quebec samples, wouldn't you do something about it? Would you try to fix it? Would you try to study what's wrong with it? I mean, look at these. Angus Reid Institute since March for the Bloc, 36, 36, 34 to 41, 42. The other pollsters have it. I mean, Abacus data had some high 30s, but Léger has 29, Sparks had 28, Nanos, well, it's paywall, but it's around the 29 to 30% mark. It's just, even the Bloc people don't believe it anymore. I mean, the overall numbers are fine. It's Angus Reid Institute. They are renowned, and I respected the polling firm, and I ranked them high. It's just that clearly that sample is skewed in Quebec. Like, come on. Like, I mean, if it's a fluctuation, it should be both ways. It's not a fluctuation. It's always high. So that's the only thing I would say about this. 21 for the Liberals. Yeah, I mean, not so long ago, I think we had a 22 from, it was 22. So it's a bit low, but it's still within range to the average. I have a 24 or 25% average. That's fine for me. I don't think I have much to take away elsewhere. Also, closer number in BC for the Angus Reid Institute. They had the Conservatives at 39 in BC, whereas usually we see high 40s. But small subsamples. I mean, it's the Angus Reid Institute sometimes has huge samples, like 3, 4, 5,000s. This one was, I think, only 1,300. So that would explain maybe the regional numbers. Did you have any takes from this?
Not really. We're not really seeing any movement. So I think that's about it. One of the things that I did note that I find interesting is that the Angus Reid Institute, while it has very good numbers for the Conservatives overall, they have worse numbers for Pierre Poilievre than we see from other pollsters. They have a 36% favorable, which is in line with, where Abacus finds positive impressions. But they have 52% unfavorable views. That's much higher than we see, especially from Abacus. But Abacus has a neutral number. So it makes me wonder how much of the neutral number that Abacus finds is neutral leaning to not positive. So it's just an interesting thing that Poilievre does seem to be a bit more divisive in the Angus Reid Institute polls, which are otherwise positive for the Conservatives, than we see in other polls. So it because you often hear people talk about whether Pierre Poilievre is popular, whether he's more popular than his party, and often people say that he's doing pretty well, but he's not doing
Yeah.
amazingly.
Yeah.
When you see polling from the Angus Reid Institute, it suggests that, well, he might have a big downside in addition to having some good upside. But is it something just the way they do it? They've always had very high favorable, unfavorable numbers for all leaders. Not a lot of don't knows, that kind of thing. So it makes me wonder why that is. But anyway, I thought it was an interesting thing that you see in this poll that Pierre Poilievre is not as popular as you'd see in other polls, but it doesn't seem to be hurting the party.
If you have a poll that has the Bloc Québécois 10 points higher than usual in Quebec, yeah, that would sink by a few points the Poilievre numbers, but not by as much as we see. That's a good point.
Okay, let's move to British Columbia. We have tons of... It's just swirling cauldron of things happening in BC.
Yeah.
So the Conservatives have, it seems to, they've settled on 7 or 8 BCU candidates who will run for them, which is not a lot considering that the BCU had over 50 candidates nominated. 3 of them are sitting MLAs who are going to run for the Conservatives, so that bumps up their kind of incumbent number to, 8? So lots of movement there. We're going to have at least 2 independents, we heard, that will run as independents, Mike Bernier and I can't recall the other, Shipika or something like that. I can't recall his name, my apologies. But we got 2 polls that came out just after Kevin Falcon made that decision to withdraw from the running. Angus Reid Institute and Palace data. Angus Reid Institute had 44 Conservative, 43 NDP, 10 Green. Palace had 44 NDP, 43 Conservatives, 11 Green. I mean, those are nearly identical polls, but it doesn't really make me feel confident about what the outcome is going to be.
Oh, no. I mean, no. I think the main takeaway here is that we had an IVR poll and an online poll that say exactly the same thing.
Yes,
and
for the first time.
For the first time. It's just that if you compare the Angus Reid Institute from, I think the previous poll was May in BC, and this, it pretty much shows that all the support from BCU went to the Conservatives.
Yeah.
If you take only those polls. Whereas if you take the Palace data poll, and we'll look forward to see new polling in BC in the coming days, it shows that the BC United pretty much split almost down the middle, maybe a slight advantage to the Conservatives. I mean, I think it feeds into the hypothesis that those BC United voters who had not defected to the Conservatives yet, they had not defected for a reason, because they don't like them. They don't feel at home. So you would think it would not be an automatic. But so yeah, their narrative. When you compare the numbers, you have to be very careful. That's why a long-term tracking is important in polling. Otherwise, it's too big a step. So who's right? Well, they say exactly the same thing. The regionals are a bit different.
Not too much, but
not too much, no.
Yeah.
But I updated my projection with a huge asterisk in the corner, and I told my readers, this is without taking into account their new candidates, because I can't just spend all day waiting for. I mean, I wait until the dust settles, and then we'll make adjustments with the incumbents. But it is important, because if the election is decided on 2, 3, 4 seats, yeah, incumbency will matter a lot. So my projection had 49 seats for the NDP. Threshold for majority is 47. So Conservatives at 43 and Greens at 1. Considering the uncertainty, the bell curve of uncertainty for the NDP and Conservatives were around 11 seats, and there's 6 seats between them. This is now a toss-up. This is now a game of ground game, and we'll see how they fare during a campaign and how they fare during a debate. We will have debates. I know in English Canada, provincial debates are not prime time because the networks can't be bothered, but it's still going to be interesting to see a 3-person debate. I like those. I don't enjoy the 5-6-person debate, but 3 is good.
No, it will be a bit of an easier field, I suppose. It'll be primarily EB versus Rustad in that debate. My projections, which are a little bit simpler than yours, but for BC, I had 47-45.
Really?
Won.
Wow.
So, that's a maximum chaos scenario, so we'll see.
A redux of 2017, but with different colors.
Yeah. It's going to be a really fascinating campaign, and from the regional numbers that both pollster showed. You said there were some differences, but generally it was NDP winning in the Lower Mainland, with the Conservatives doing well in parts of it, at least based on what ARI was showing.
Yeah.
The Conservatives more or less running away with it in the interior, and the NDP doing better on Vancouver Island. That kind of map works for the NDP, but when it is now just a more of a traditional orange versus, quote unquote, right of center party, it just changes based on the election. When you get that close, it could just be, as you said in 2017, be a toss-up result in terms of who comes out ahead. I find the independents interesting.
Yeah.
Because we'll see how they're going to do. BC has a history of electing independents. Vicky Huntington used to get elected. I think she got elected twice as an independent. I wonder if some of these independents are actually now more electable than they were when they were tied to BCU and Kevin Falcon. Maybe now people will be like, you know what? I didn't like Kevin Falcon. I didn't like BCU, but I did like this guy. And now that he's on his own, maybe I'm going to vote for him. I think that they could actually... I don't know if they'll win, but they could play a huge role. And that whole vote split for some of those ridings might still end up being a bit of an issue.
For us, it will be.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the precedent of independence. I mean, I go by precedent. It's just that it's thin and it wildly varies from one case to another. So, yeah. I think BC is going to be on our minds for the next, what is it, 8 weeks? No, that's less than that. It's 6 weeks. Oh my God, it's coming in 6 weeks. Whew.
Okay, let's move to the questions. So we're going to answer one question from our Patreon supporters for the public episode, and then we're going to go answer some more for the extended Patreon edition of the podcast. And if you want to hear our answers to those questions, you can go to thenumberspod.ca to join. So this one we got from Nathaniel Rakich, who is, of course, well known from 538, and we're happy to have him as one of our members. He should be on here. We should talk to him before the U.S. election.
Oh, yeah, we should.
But he had, quite understandably, a U.S.-related question, but we'll get to it here. So he asks, do you think the outcome of the U.S. presidential election has the ability to impact the Canadian election at all? For example, if Trump wins and things get messy in the U.S., will that make Canadians get cold feet about Poilievre? Or maybe if Trump wins, they'll want someone who can speak his language, and it might help the Conservatives. A lot of people have discussed this. We've seen some polling on it. What are your views about what the outcome, the impact of the U.S. election will be on the Canadian election and the Canadian landscape politically?
Yeah, I think we love to talk about it. As for impact or in the numbers, I don't see it having. I mean, if Trump wins, you think some conservatives now are going to go like, wait, hang on a second. I don't want Poilievre and Trump shaking hands. That's not going to happen. I think it's overblown in terms of the numbers. Now, maybe I'll stand corrected. Let's say Trump does win and we'll have polling in January and February. We'll see whether it changes. I think the narrative could dramatically be altered. There's a huge difference of outcome between Ms. Harris and Mr. Trump. But as term as the ability to impact our elections and our voting intentions, I don't think there's much evidence and studies about that. And perhaps I'm just speculating here, but I don't see it. What do you think?
I think that the polling has suggested that Canadians kind of view who is better to deal with Trump in the same ways they do who is better to run the country. Poilievre beats Trudeau on that question.
Yeah.
So I don't think that if Trump wins in November that all of a sudden there will be an impact on the polls. I think the impact could be kind of in the way that Nathaniel asked the question, what happens after that?
Yeah.
If Trump makes decisions that require action from Canada, whether it's on trade barriers, that kind of thing, or questions about democracy in the United States, that could change things, because then it would depend on how Justin Trudeau, if he was still Prime Minister at the time, reacts to it. What does Pierre Poilievre say as an opposition leader? That could have an impact. That is, I think, what is the wild card. Not so much that I don't think it will be a simple question of Canadians saying I don't want that to happen here, so I won't vote Conservative, because I don't think Canadians view the Conservative Party as an equivalent to the Republicans. But I just think that it throw so much uncertainty up into the air that it could cause events that change things. And I think that's where there could be an impact here, because Trump is not popular in Canada.
No.
And if Trump became president and starts attacking Justin Trudeau, that actually might help Justin Trudeau's image, right? if he's seen as someone who gets under Trump's skin. I think that's how it could impact things.
Yeah.
But whether it helps one or the other, I don't know. If Trudeau messes up dealing with Trump and Poilievre strikes the right tone, then it helps Poilievre. But it's the wild card of what it will cause in terms of Canadian politics that I think is going to have the impact, and that we don't know.
You mentioned events, right? Create the outcome could create events. I think for the Trudeau Liberals, the fewer events, the better. Events, whatever they are, if it shakes up the international community, it's never good for the incumbent. So, yeah, I kind of agree with you there. But I also think that it's overblown, and Canadians know it's a different country, even though it has a huge impact on us. But we'll see. Well, it's going to be interesting to follow. I mean, south of the border, one campaign is just absolutely gone batshit, and Miss Harris is having a classical good campaign, but the numbers are tied. It's going to come down to a few thousand votes in swing states. As amazing as this sounds, again, maybe we'll record the tape and there's going to be a landslide, and then I'll be proven wrong. But so far, every poll that I see is within the margin of error. It's like, Harris is lead by 2 in Pennsylvania. Okay, no, that's a tie. That's a tie. And if you go back to 2016 and 2020, Trump was always underestimated in the polls in swing states. So they can't have confidence one way or the other. But that's another topic, though. We'll get back to that at some point.
Yeah, we'll have some time. All right. Let's get to the Patreon question. Okay, how about the quiz? I think you have a special one.
I have a little quiz for you, my friend. The format is the same as we used before, with a twist. So I have 3 politicians on my list here, 4 clues. Nothing different from past times. I give you 1 clue for 4 points. You get it. We have 1 free guess. You get it wrong, we go to the second clue for 3 points, and so on. The twist here is that, Eric, you've been crushing my quizzes lately. And good for you. You perform very well. Sometimes I say, my quiz was too easy. No, you did really well. But the thing is, now you'll have to beat the challenger. So I'll give you a clue. You have 1 free guess. If you get it, good for you, you get 4 points. If you don't get it, I will ask ChatGPT to guess for you. I program my ChatGPT. I explain the rules. And I even tested ChatGPT with past quizzes that we've done. There was one quiz where we had 4 names, so a potential of 16 points. And I gave the clue. I told it just 1 guess. And ChatGPT had 12 points out of 16. He had 4, 3, and 2.
I like that.
So
okay.
You have 1 advantage. I told ChatGPT these are political figures in Canada. I will tell you the names here are either premiers or prime ministers. So this is your advantage, okay? So if you get it wrong, ChatGPT can steal your points, and you have to beat it.
Okay.
How about that?
That sounds fun. And just to understand, have you already asked ChatGPT these questions?
No, I will do it live.
Oh, boy, you're going to do it live. Okay.
I'm going to do it live, copy-paste. I'm going to do it live, okay?
All right, well, hopefully that'll work. Okay,
so there's 3 names, and so a potential of 12 points, but obviously if ChatGPT beats you, they take the points. So there's no gold, silver, or bronze. You have to beat ChatGPT.
It's a race. Just got to be ahead of it.
Okay. You are ready?
Yep.
Okay. First person, first clue for 4 points. This politician was born in Windsor, Ontario. He was part of the short-lived Frank Miller cabinet of the Ontario PCs in the 1980s.
Okay. You said it was a premier or a prime minister, so it has to be. I mean, short. I guess it has to be Mike Harris.
No, it's not Mike Harris. I will now copy-paste this clue into ChatGPT. Seeing what he gets. This is live, right? And ChatGPT guessed wrong. He guessed Alan Pope. And it's not
Who is
right.
Alan Pope?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
You're still in the running for 3 points.
Okay, yeah, next clue.
Next clue. This person ran in politics in the riding of Parry Sound.
Oh, okay. Then it's going to be Ernie Eves.
And it is Ernie Eve. You get 3 points. Good for you. You got it first. I'm just going to enter this clue to ChatGPT to see whether you would have had it, but the 3 points are yours.
Thank you.
He guesses. He's thinking. Ernie Eves, so he got it. But you got it
tied.
first. Okay.
We're tied, though. 3-3.
Yeah, okay. Good for you. The third clue was in the 90s, he became Minister of Finance and Deputy Premier to Mike Harris. And the last clue, he became the first incumbent PC Premier to win fewer seats than the OLP in almost 70 years. That blew me away, though. That's interesting.
That's interesting.
Oh, well. Okay. Okay, 3 points for Eric. Second person. I'm just going to tell, okay, you got it. This is good podcasting, all right? Second person. Okay. This person was born in Montreal from a family of wealth and privilege. This person had politics in their blood. As a teenager, they distributed communist leaflets.
Is that Pierre Trudeau?
It is not Pierre Trudeau.
Oh.
Okay. I'm copy-pasting this clue. First clue. Into ChatGPT. Oops, sorry.
Communists from Montreal. Wealth and privilege.
Okay. ChatGPT guessed Pierre Trudeau. He's wrong. So great minds think alike. Okay.
Okay.
Second clue. This person ran for office in the Montreal districts of Ahuntsic in 70 and Crémazie in 73, but lost both.
Ahuntsic and Crémazie. Would that have been Jacques Parizeau?
It is Jacques Parizeau. You get 3 points.
Okay.
Good job. Okay, entering this clue in ChatGPT. Second clue.
I didn't know about the communist part. I remember the story was that when the PQ government came in, Parizeau went to the financing people in New York to get a loan for the government and had to tell them we're not communists. I guess he could have said any more.
Any more, that's right. ChatGPT guessed René Lévesque. So you beat him. You beat him right there. Okay. I'm just going to tell him wrong. Okay. My third clue for Jacques Parizeau was a committed sovereigntist. This person eventually led his PQ membership lapse and supported Option Nationale. And,
really?
And the last one was he likes lobsters and algae.
Yeah.
You know that story, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the two Chantal.
Well, the story was that there was reporting by Chantal Hébert that in a discussion with, I can't remember with who it was, but Parizeau said that if Quebecers voted yes in 95, they'd be trapped like lobsters in a pot, that it wouldn't really matter that, there was flowery language in the referendum question about association, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Third person, you're leading. You have, 6 points? You have 6 points, right? This person was born in Vancouver. They received a BA from the prestigious Dartmouth College in New Hampshire and received an MBA from Simon Fraser University.
BC, Vancouver. I don't know who you're going with this. I don't know. Gordon Campbell.
And it is Gordon Campbell.
Hey!
4 points. Let's see if ChatGPT can get it. He guessed Kim Campbell, the wrong Campbell. So there you go. We discovered.
Smarter than
Eric
AI.
beat ChatGPT. Congratulations, Eric. That was really
Thank you.
good. The other the clues were this person's political career began in 1984 when they were elected to Vancouver City Council. Then 2 years later, this person became mayor of Vancouver. And finally, this person won the biggest landslide in a province's history. So,
All right. Well, anyway, I'm smarter than a language-trained AI
Absolutely.
model. I'm happy to see it.
not even close. Good for you, man.
All right, number of the week. What do you have?
To go back to the Angus Reid Institute BC poll, something that really struck my eye was obviously we see an age gap here between the younger and older voters. We know that traditionally BC voters, not BC voters, but younger voters are attracted to the NDP. It's much closer than we think among young voters, and I think that reflects what we see at the federal level. So the 1834s were more split. Among male, it was 53% NDP and 40% conservative. Now, you can say that's 13 points different. We're used to have larger gaps than that. Among young women, and I know the sample size is small, the gap is much wider. So there's going to be a generation split, and there's going to be also a gender split in this vote. It's going to be fascinating to follow. What about you?
I did see that, and I was wondering about that because we had seen polls before showing that Conservatives are doing better among younger voters in British Columbia. So
yeah, the IVRs,
yeah, something to watch if because the NDP's turnout advantage, because it seemed like they were doing better among older voters, might not actually be the case. So something to keep an eye on. Okay, mine is, and you're going to love this one, 91. It's the number of candidates that are going to be on the ballot in La Salle-Verdun.
So by love, you meant not love, but okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So 91 candidates, it's going to be the record. Apparently, Elections Canada is going to try to avoid what happened in Toronto St. Paul's with the long count. I think they're going to hire more people. They said they're going to start counting the advance polls early. So maybe we won't have to be on the air until 4:30 in the morning. But we now are aware of the situation. There will be 91 candidates on the ballot, and it'll be a long night. It'll be a fun night.
Yeah.
But it'll be another long night. Hopefully, please, Elections Canada, do hire everybody. If you cast a ballot, you then get to count it. We don't want to have a long thing.
Do we get a declared winner in Transcona before La Salle-Mare? Even with a time change? Even with a time change?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Can we make a call before midnight?
Well, thing is, it could also not be close, right?
Yeah.
Midnight? No. No, get your coffee at 8 p.m. We'll have a drink. We'll have something to hydrate ourselves because it's going to be a long night. And hopefully our members will be along with us. This is going to be a fun one. Toronto St. Paul's was a lot of fun, even though we couldn't make a call by 2 a.m. And thank God we didn't. Remember, I think they declared it at 4. The tank was empty in my end. But I'll be ready, and I don't teach on Tuesday mornings, so I'll be ready to go all night if it's required.
All right. Well, there you go. You join us for that. That'll be on September 16th on YouTube. And just want to take this time again. This is approaching our first anniversary for the podcast. So we really want to thank everybody who has supported us over this year. People who've signed up for the Patreon, and that number keeps growing, and we're really, really appreciative of it.
Oh, yeah.
People who are watching on YouTube, those have been increasing a lot. We're happy to see people engage in the comments, and sometimes nicely. And we just really appreciate it. We've also been having a lot of fun. We didn't really know each other too well before this started, but now that we've been chatting every week, I think it's safe to say we're pretty good friends now. So, they say that the real value is the friends you made along the way.
There you go.
Well, that's been the case with this podcast, both between you and I and our members. That a lot of them are a lot of fun on the Discord. So thanks a lot. And if you want to join us and support us, keep us going, the numbers pod.ca would really appreciate it. And Philippe, thank you for coming on to this for this year, and looking forward to the next year and who knows after that. And looking forward to next week, and we'll talk again in a week.
Eric, we are just getting started. Thanks for your support, everyone. We really appreciate it. Have a great week.